Right, so kind of a bit of a return, revisit to this crank, the Elilee X310 that I did a video a few weeks ago, months ago now maybe. I will also revisit this, which was the super cheap Deckas Chainring that I had some issues with. Of course, we need to put something new on the scales, and that will be this new chainring from Garbaruk. That will be the final setup that I'm using going forward with this crank. I also just wanted to address a few things that was dropped in comments regarding this crank in terms of Q-Factor and a little bit of crank length talk as well, maybe. So this might be a little bit on the long side. Just me need to get some stuff off my chest. So the reason I got this chainring in the beginning was because this is especially the cheapest way for me to actually confirm out on the road that the 44 tooth chainring would be a good match for me and the kind of riding I plan on doing or am doing. And since I had the spider that came with a crank, yeah, it was a really cheap way to try it out in the real world. The end plan was always to get a direct mount chainring since the interface for this crank is the normal Eastern interface or a race face interface. And I actually have had this chainring in a 42 back when I had my Eastern crank as well. So I knew what I was in for. I know the really long tooth, the profile they use can be a bit noisy, but it was a safe bet. And compared to even like the Chinese brand chainrings, I forgot the name now. Maybe I put it up on the screen somewhere here. But when I took the shipping and everything into account, the price overall was actually not that much cheaper than the Garbaruk ring, so that's why I went with this. I've always been fond of this spider type design as well, ever since I had my SISL2 crank, Cannondale. Yeah, I love that spider ring. So, ended up with the Garbaruk again. Let's start with putting this on the scales, see where we end up. Actually, we check the complete weight of the crank, including chainring, to start with, just to see where we add up. And you can't see that, can you? 423.2 grams for the complete set with ring. That is pretty sweet. Let's check the ring by itself. 112.6 grams, and compare this to the Deckas, same teeth count, but with that spider, 144 grams. So yeah, nice saving and all that mess. If you've seen the original video on this chainring, you remember I complained of the wear pattern. You can see the chain has worn the teeth, and you can really feel the wear pattern, whatever. That might have been a little bit of an overreaction from my side. Some of the commenters on the original video say they didn't really have any problems with it. And if you look at the Garbaruk chainring for about the same amount of distance ridden, it also has that little bit of wear tooth mark. It's not as severe as this, but I mean, that might just be something you have to live with in the beginning. Once this wear down, might not be an issue. I'm no expert, so I won't say much. Of course, this is aluminium rings. The chain will be much harder in terms of material from my very limited understanding. So I really wouldn't worry about these wearing out the chain prematurely, anything like that. But seeing how this have worn of this few hundred Ks, I probably wouldn't really worry about this either in hindsight. All right, so that's the chain rings. I also wanted to revisit this crank a bit and talk about something I didn't really mention in the original video, and that was the Q-Factor. It's a Q151.5. And if you compare that to a Shimano crank or even my THM crank, for example, that has a Q-Factor of 149. So that's, what is that then? 3.5 millimeters wider Q-Factor. Now, I will say I can't tell a difference at all jumping from the other crank to this. Of course, it's a different bike, so there's a lot of other factors that kind of influence how different the bike feels. But to me, I can't tell the difference in terms of my stance feeling, if you know what I mean. Of course, people are probably more sensitive to this than I am. Well, obviously, it seems that a few millimeters seems to bother a lot of people if you read the internet. But if you're worried that a Q-factor would be an issue for you, it's a really simple test actually. Just take your current, I'm assuming you have a Shimano crank or something similar with a 148 Q-factor. Just take some paddle washers. Here I have two 1 millimeter thick washers. Put it on there, put it on your bike and give it a try and see if it's a big, huge difference for you or not. Very simple to try. For me, like I said, it's a non-issue. And even if it was, I would be able to adjust my cleats to take up that difference if, yeah, it would have had to come to that. Of course, like I mentioned in the original video, because these are a little bit straighter than normal, they have no curve, so to speak, so you could run into some heel clearance issues depending on how your current is set up. Now, while the Q-factor didn't really bother me, the crank length I could feel a difference. Not huge. I could go either way. Like if you said to me you have to ride 165 for the rest of your life, I could do that, no issues. But compared to my normal 172.5, I will say I do prefer the longer crank arms for the type of riding I'm doing, which is a lot of grinding up climbs. I'm natural, pretty low cadence on climbing, and especially when I grind up those climbs, I do feel that 165 feels slightly cramped, and cramped is the wrong word. Yes, the pedaling circle feels a bit too small for my preference. Of course, you can argue that you can get used to anything, which I'm sure I could. I do feel slightly interesting to try something in the middle, so 170 or 167.5, would that be the next one? And that brings me to the last part of this video. I actually found something on Cycle Mode Tokyo, of all places, which is basically a kind of bike expo show with that's pretty pathetic compared to anything else out in the world. There's never anything new stuff there. But this time I was surprised to see Elilee was there and showing off all these weird bikes and stuff, including the cranks. But they also had their new, even lighter crank. And I'm not talking about the, whatever it's called, the one with the carbon spindle, which is a 30 millimeter spindle. I have no interest in that. But it's a new crank that's not out yet. So I go insert the video I took on my phone, and this new crank's called X310, looks like. And from what they said there, it's going to be on sale in June this year, I think. So this still has the 24 millimeter titanium spindle, which I think is the main real benefit of the Elilee cranks. And if you look at the tip of the spindle in the new crank, you can see that they have changed how you attach it to the crank arm. So instead of the internal thread, as you can see on this crank, you have this bolt on the crank arm that you screw in there. It's basically a copy of the Easton or race face system. On this new crank, you have the threads on the outside, which, yeah, you probably need a special tool to attach it, which is a little bit of a bummer maybe, but all for the grams. It's all for the grams. So 285 grams for the crank set. And if you pair that with the Elilee's carbon spiders as well, those carbon spiders are supposed to be 32 grams. It still would be a bit heavier, about 5-10 grams heavier maybe than the Clavicula SE crank. But yeah, and if you're talking price-wise, I think it said something about $600 for the crank. Of course, that spider is a bit more, but we are still way, way cheaper than the Clavicula crank. So I think it will be a pretty nice option. And while we're skipping this hideous graphics on the X310, the front-facing graphics, yeah, they have some. I still think they have some homework to do on the graphics department. But overall, I think that the finish of the attachment, the brushed hardware on the crank looked very high finish. Might be just a prototype, I have no idea. But yeah, and if I can actually try 170 or 167.5, it might be something that's coming in the future. We'll see. All right, I think that's it. That was quite long. Yes, it was. Catch you in the next one. Peace.